We're here to kick things off, and of course we're going to establish the definitive shape of the new UX. Is it an orb, a polyhedron, a cube? I don't know. Ready to find out. First, let's share some of your backgrounds. We'll go kind of maybe just go down the line. What I'd love to hear from you each is, obviously your role, a little bit of organizational context from you, and in one word, maybe a little explanation, one word that describes the shape of UX in ancient times, like 2022. Gordon.
Well, I will start with an introduction and I'll get to my shape. Julie's given us this prompt of these shapes and it's consumed our minds day and night to arrive here and get here. I'm so delighted to be here, my first collab, so thank you for having me.
Yes, welcome.
My name is Gordon Chang, founder CEO of Design Executive Council based over in San Francisco. We're the premier membership network for corporate design executives, so my primary focus is really on VP to Chief Design Officers of Fortune 1000 companies to help advance the strategic role and value of design leadership at the C-suite and board level. So I'm deeply obsessed with this topic as someone who also did a graduate thesis on this, and that's actually what turned into the business.
Oh, wow.
But prior to that, I was a marketer, designer, researcher at companies like Affirm and Apple. So delighted to be here. My shape that I've been thinking a lot about is, and I actually had to ask Google and ChatGPT, is this a shape? Tectonic plates.
We can take some liberties.
I was like, is tectonic plates a shape? And they said yes. So here's why.
Okay.
Should I go into it or just?
Yeah, please.
Okay, tectonic plates because I've been thinking a lot about cycles.
Yeah.
And I think similar to earthquakes, it's a cyclical thing. And I think that in 2022, we felt this earthquake. It was a compounding set of factors. It was interest rate changes. It was a political change as well as a technological change. And so you combine these three factors, there's a lot of discomfort, I think, in a day-to-day sense. But this is, I think, what we're here to talk about is the seismic shifts that we've seen, and also how to make sense of it at a practical level.
Yeah, I love that because it reminds us that as omnipresent as AI is and as big as it feels to us, it's not the only force at play. Yeah, and the way we deploy it kind of is affected by some of these other forces. That's great. Craig.
Hi, everyone. So Craig McIntosh, also my first collab. Starting with a fun fact, so I lead UX research at LinkedIn and our research operations team. The person who had that job before me is also sat on this stage, so we're very familiar with each other.
Yeah.
So been there 6+ years, obviously seen a lot of change in that time. I'm going to play the origami theme forward, not just with one word. I think we have been the paper finger puzzle where someone asks you a question and you do the little thing and then you give them an answer. Mysterious, they ask us a question, we give them an answer, they're not quite sure how it works. And I think that's really important because I think those questions are really pressing with everything that we're just about to talk about.
Yeah. Origami was my little back pocket one too. It's so delicate and intricate and beautiful, and but you put it so well. Eleanor.
I love the Alice in Wonderland reference, by the way. It's very timely. Hi, Eleanor Stanford. I've worked at Disney for about 4 years. So I lead all of our design for internal tooling, so enterprise design across the enterprise. I also work on some of our consumer-facing work. I have a background in innovation, and so I work on some of our most important projects. Fun fact, I didn't realize this, but I've slowly become a Disney adult. I love it. I love it. It's so good. I get to spend some work days.
Good for you.
It's pretty fun. Like a couple of weeks ago, I was eating a churro, riding the Incredicoaster for research reasons. So, But my shape is a big old hunk of wood. And I think about it because, and I guess we'll get there, but my grandpa was in Roosevelt's Conservation Corps. And so he left my mom and I with a bunch of amazing tools. And my mom kind of knows what to do with them. I also kind of know planers and all these different things. And I feel like there's a there, that like we have the ability to shape something, but I'm still trying to figure out like, what do I do with this? And like, I don't have that same expertise that Grandpa did, but there's a there.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I'm Cal Thompson. I'm the VP of Product Design and Research at Headspace. Been there for 5.5 years, and before that I worked at Fjord with Martha Cotton, who's right here in the audience. And I live in Vermont and LA, and actually, Julie, when you said the shape of UX, I was really more thinking about like where it is now. So I'll have to like go back to 2022, and I feel like we were all in sort of that like weird middle post-pandemic, like what are we, who are we, am I a human, what am I doing, do I have a, like who are these people that I work with, what is design, so I think, you know, I'll give you my shape in that frame. I think that at that moment we were like a tree that had been partially cut down, and we were trying to regrow our own limbs. Like we weren't, for many of us, we weren't like collaborating in person, which I feel like is such a powerful part of the design process.
Yeah.
We were all kind of like, can I do this through Miro and FigJam? I guess so, you know, and Zoom. So anyway, so that was that. And then I think, and we'll get into this later, but like I think where we're going with the shape of UX is like really refinding our roots and really branching out and being that connector and that, you know, nourishing presence that's observing it all, watching it all, you know, helping people get grounded again and rooted in reality.
Like those walking trees in Lord of the Rings.
Yes, like what are they called?
Ents.
Ents?
They're
Yeah,
ents.
thank you. Yeah,
Lord of the Rings
exactly.
Okay, well, I'm glad that we had
And
someone
they're
on
like,
stage
and
who
they're
could-
thoughtful and they listen. Maybe we talk a little faster than the Ents, but yeah.
Maybe. I guess it depends who you ask.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to circle back to all the shapes. See what I did there? Okay. But I also invite you to go on our Slack and add your own shapes. Like these were so evocative and so interesting. And also I want an AI-generated image of all of these shapes. So look for that coming soon in my obsession, my AI obsession. All right. I want to really get into some of the meat of the matter of all of these seismic shifts, these forces that are affecting our field right now, and how they're playing out in your organizations. You know, you all have such interesting vantage points, really different types of vantage points, different types of teams and industries. So, you know, I guess I want to start with you, Craig. You know, LinkedIn's been very vocal about publishing some big changes to the product organization, and I think the organization overall based on these changes, and they're the most dramatic I've heard of from my perspective. So I'd love to start with you, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about how things are playing out at LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so there's also, for transparency, a couple of my team in the audience, so if I look in that direction, that's why. We'll see if this is resonating or not. So to Julie's point, one of the things that I think, you know, many folks, including myself, have published about on LinkedIn is this transition to what we're calling full stack builder. So this is a philosophy that has come from our chief product officer on down. We all sit in the product organization. And so, you know, it definitely has started as a philosophy. We're early in that journey. But the idea behind it is that anyone can move from idea or insight to impact. So, you know, if we take the product development process that we know and love, maybe, how can someone transition effectively and efficiently, no matter what their discipline, from one end to the other? And obviously doing that in an agentic way, you know, human AI collaboration, using AI as a thought partner, or, you know, to basically provide or augment skills that were traditionally distinct into one product development flow. And so, you know, I think, you know, for a room of UX professionals, it's easy to look at that and have a lot of thoughts and emotions. But one of the really interesting things that's happened relatively quickly is we've tried to define what does this actually mean. Mm-hmm. We've taken, you know, that principle that everyone can be a full stack builder and really played it out. So, for example, just in this past couple of weeks, we had our first UX researcher actually ship her first product. So I think it's easy to assume that you know, direction might go one way, but we've actually seen it play out multiple ways. Yeah. So it's a very, very big change, but one that we're excited about.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to dig into, and I'm sure people are going to want to talk to you and the other, Andrea and Kevin from LinkedIn as well on this. You know what I think about is everybody's a full stack builder. It sounds a lot to me like everybody can do research, and we have been through the democratization ringer, so to speak. Like, we know what it's like to scale processes and invite other people to do things that they don't possess the skills outright to do, and do that in a way that's balanced and fair. And it kind of leads into this conversation that we had last year at CoLab, and that so many people are continuing to have around specialists versus generalists. So in a world that you're describing, it's easy to take your mind somewhere where, oh, now everybody does everything. Is everybody a generalist? What does it mean to have specialties anymore? So I'm curious, like, as things are playing out, how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think what we've seen so far and what we'll continue to see is it really does open up that generalist versus specialist dynamic. Mm-hmm. And I think that applies to all the disciplines, everyone involved in the product organization, because I think you're probably going to continue to have specialists. So research, for example, researchers that are all about the craft of research. They are, they want to invest in rigor, explore methods that are new to them. Obviously, we're entering an entirely new paradigm. There's a lot of new things to research. So, we're moving on from a space where maybe we were the design research team to the human AI collaboration research team. So I think, there's definitely room for specialists with those disciplines. The question becomes, when is the right time to pull those specialists in? But I think it opens up an equally exciting opportunity for generalists, and generalists can mean anyone from any discipline building in that way.
Yeah.
Researchers, I think, actually come with an inherent advantage because we understand our audience. We have, performed numerous studies uncovering numerous problems and delivered insights on how to resolve them. And, even if we haven't been in the day-to-day of product management or product design, depending on our background, because of AI and all the tools that we're using, we can fill in those gaps to get to a certain level of delivery. And then the conversation changes. Then it's not about, is this the right insight, or what was the research method, or who did you talk to, and was it the right recruit? It becomes more of an active conversation because you're building a recommendation, or you're showing what the end result is that you mean. I think the other way that, there's potentially a third way, which is researchers building for researchers or building for other full stack builders. So to your point, rigor is going to be a really important question. If we need to build agentic tooling, self-service tooling for non-researchers, who better to build that than the folks in this room that know what good looks like?
Yeah. It reminds me of the conversation we had at dinner last night about categories and how they're sometimes useful and sometimes kind of trap us a little bit. So I think we're kind of pushing on that a little bit. Anybody have anything to add, build on?
I'd love to build on.
Great.
That is I think that's so awesome, and we see a lot of those similar themes. I think right now, with the white rabbit, to use that metaphor, our product leader, I also sit in our product organization, has really pushed us towards experimentation. And when you're running fast and when you're experimenting, we don't have time for some of those conversations that we've had over the past few years around, like, how does the triad show up, product design, engineering, and of course research. Like, we don't have time for those politics right now, and we're seeing that the teams who already had great relationships and just knew how to work with each other as people, those are the teams that are getting experiments done faster, and they don't see those lines. And I'll give a good example is recently over in our customer service tooling, we had a group. These people have been working together for years, and they pushed an experiment, and it was great because design was pushing on, I don't know if this is right for this is how we need to think about it for the user. We had, research really backing in some of the latest analytics that we pulled. And then our eng team, they took some risks that they may not have been because they were bolstered by that group. So on the park side of the business, Imagineers. Like, Imagineers is this broad term, like you were talking about. Imagine it, and then you get it done. It's inherent in the name, and that it gives people kind of that flexibility and a little bit of like softness around the edges to go beyond just what a role or what our definition in triad is. And so I'm really seeing that when we can soften that and just show up as a really awesome team that knows how to get stuff done is more successful.
Yeah, something I wanted to add to that we were talking about earlier. So we haven't formally changed our job titles at Headspace yet. I mean, we may. But I think where we've seen AI augment tools or augment teams, that's where I'm seeing the most success, and very similar to what you're talking about. The teams that already know each other, love each other, know how to collaborate, respect each other as humans are doing it the best. There's a recent example on Jonathan's team, who's right here in the audience, where a PM essentially vibe coded a prototype of a feature that she realized we were missing from our website, and then handed that over to Jonathan and one of his designers. And because Jonathan and this PM have a great working relationship and are super collaborative and respect each other, they were able to, take this, and then his product designer made it better, more usable, more, like higher fidelity visuals. Like, she essentially used this vibe-coded prototype from Figma Make to be a wireframe. It was like a functional wireframe.
Yeah.
And it helped her understand some of the edge cases that she maybe would have taken a little time to have to sort through. Like, it gave those to start with, but she still did all the correct UX processes. She just didn't have to do as much of them. Like, she did competitive analysis, she went into visual design, she went into high fidelity visuals. It just was like she had that augmentation and support, but all of her incredible discernment, the fact that she went to design school and she was an artist, it was all there. She was using all of those capabilities. So the generalist versus specialist discussion, I think it's really important to think about what are those specialist skills that ensure that the work is actually interesting, is actually solving a real problem, is usable. Those are the discernment skills that we as practitioners need to bring in on the specialist level, even as we all operate as generalists, essentially.
Yeah. I know there are people here in attendance who are at companies that are just at the beginning stages of these kinds of experiments, these organizational experiments. So I'm sure all of you will have a lot of questions. Yeah, Gordon, how do you see it from your?
Yeah, so I think what's interesting, I'm not a practitioner no longer, so I have a very kind of different point of view. I kind of look at it through patterns and the macro landscape of both large and kind of up and coming companies.
Yeah,
and one really, I think, pointed discussion here is as you get compression in organizations, there's kind of two things that I've seen. One is I'm hearing about black box teams. So they're composed of multidisciplinary units of leaders and teams, and it's really focused on a journey or an outcome. And it's less about the traditional, I think, lines that we've seen in the squad or the triad, but it's breaking that down. And so I've seen that already start to emerge in some of these larger organizations as well as small ones. But the second one that really sticks out for me is if everyone's becoming a builder, how do we nurture and define quality at scale? And I think the job of a designer and researcher has a really critical role to ask those questions at a company, because if I ask you what quality means versus what Craig thinks quality, very different answers. But if you can achieve that at an enterprise level, it's really powerful, because if you combine those kind of journey models, end-to-end squads, with a shared definition of quality, you get a really transformative effect, but it's not an easy road.
Yeah, and I think I've been thinking too that quality definition is really important, but also there's a lot that needs to be established, to maintain that trust and those great relationships that you all just described, to execute at that level. It doesn't just happen. And of course, if everybody's a builder, how much stuff do we need built? I'm of the just because you can doesn't mean you should school of product development. So
one more thing to add to that is quality at the building level versus quality at the what problem level.
Right.
And I think those two distinctions are really important, because we can get really lost as, I think, craftspeople in the, how to solve it really well, but I think there's also what problem that I'm hearing a lot of emphasis on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just to touch on that real quick. So one of the other changes that we've made in tandem with moving to this full stack builder model is we actually created, just to your point, a LinkedIn architecture team that we sit within. And so part of that remit is exactly to your question, how do we build a cohesive, seamless experience? And one of the first things that we pushed on is that definition of product quality. Because I think, back to Julie's point, if everyone's building, how do you define what a quality experience is? Where's the craft bar? Where's the craft conversation? Craft leads back to specialism. And so Marika McCloskey, one of the directors in my team, along with Kevin and others, has gone to really great efforts to like capture that North Star of how do we quantify quality in the product. And it has unleashed a lot of conversations tied to, you know, everything that we just discussed, because it does raise some of those existential questions.
I saw Sarah's title got changed with architecture. So I think it's an interesting time where we're seeing what is that new shape of design leadership, and I'm seeing like there's a whole governance role that is even more important than we've seen before.
Yeah, yeah. And Gordon, I want to ask you, do you think that we're in a, you know, from your vantage point, do you think we're in an era where we can see a power shift that favors UX? Do you agree or disagree with that provocation?
I fully agree with it.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of growth, I think, for us to go through to meet that reality. But what I'm seeing is because design research has built this inherent craft for decades. We're not arriving at the AI era with just like, oh, we got to do this now.
Right.
I think a lot of other disciplines are kind of starting to dig into taste and craft, but we've been doing it for a long time. So I think it actually gives us a front kind of advantage to think about like how are we getting ahead of those conversations, helping CEOs already see like, hey, there are governance issues tied to if you are going to compress organizations, there are runaway problems that could also emerge. So in my view, I'm very excited actually about what I'm seeing. I think there's a unease that is very natural, but what I've seen in some of these top leaders is they have already a mindset of like getting ahead. Like what are those 3 steps, 5-year plans, 10, I've even seen 10-year plus cycles some of these leaders are navigating to help their companies think about the future state of those organizations, because there are some significant like business model reinvention exercises a lot of people are going through. So if as a design and research leader you can step ahead and get into those conversations, I think it's a very powerful moment.
Yeah, and that's really different from the like P&L, ROI types of conversations that we've had in the past. Yeah. And you talked about like there's a lot we have to do to get there. Like what are some of those things that you think are things that our industry needs to work on to make this possible, make it happen?
Yeah, so one thing that an advisor has taught me a lot about is how do you always keep the business moving? I think as practitioners in the space we're in, we love asking a lot of questions. I heard you say a lot of different prompts, on stage, and I think sometimes one of the trappings that we can run into is like we ask so many questions that it like kind of overbloats, and design loves to grow the scope, and then suddenly like we don't know where we are. And so I see that happen a lot in our field, and one of the things I've been really trying to encourage leaders is how are you keeping the ball moving? Do you know the timelines, the deadlines? And yes, ask all those questions, but keep it in mind of what those kind of deliverables are. So one of the things I've been really orienting is like in the practice of strategic design leadership, it really depends what your mandate is, right? And so if I think about, for the 3 of you, is it you're pegged to 3-year timelines, 5-year timelines, 6-month timelines, 2-week timelines? And so knowing what your kind of expectations are set by stakeholders and you can influence it really puts you in a position of like both pragmatism and also the space to be idealistic. And so I think for a lot of leaders, it's like pay attention to where the ball is, how fast it's moving, where it's going, and how are you oriented in your mandate towards it. And don't lose sight of that, because I think that creates the sandbox for you to play with.
Yeah. How does that resonate with anybody? Want to build on that?
Look at me. I have a spicy take on everything. No, I think, what's interesting about that is what you're speaking to is sort of like how do we as design practitioners and leaders have the right kind of influence? And something we were talking about when we were preparing for this panel, I was sharing this with Julie, I feel like a lot of us who have been leaders in tech for a while are really practiced at being good kids. I don't know if any of you relate to this, but you hear a lot of things that like fellow leaders will say, or your board will say, or investors will say, and you're like, you sort of have to play the good kid and just sort of be like, yes, yeah, very interesting idea, even though it's like horrible, horrible, like not good for humanity, not good for the world. Like, what are we talking about? So I think, so the influence piece, I think, like Gordon, what you're speaking about with design research being a practice that often asks a lot of questions. I think there is this trade-off. Ask the right questions, and researchers are really so good at that. Ask those questions that cause leaders, investors, board, everyone to reflect a little bit, and also offer solutions, like, offer guidance, offer direction, offer where you think things could and should go. Like if you're, for me, I'm more working on like a 1-year roadmap kind of timeline. That's usually my world. And then like reviewing work that's feeding into that. It's like, there are times when it is important to ask more kind of controversial questions to get people to think more deeply about whether something is right. And then there are times when it's really about like offering the solutions that will bring the business closer to the humans that it is meant to serve. Like ultimately the business is in the business of, serving customers, like the real humans are on the other end of that. So, that is our role, to bring the business closer to that and bring the knowledge and insights from those users to the business. We're that like wonderful hybrid layer in between.
I mean, and this is the attention I really want to ask all of you about. It's like, we know we need to drive the business forward. Obviously, we know AI is really great at things. We know we're really good at things that are very human things. And those things that we value as an industry that we're quite good at and have honed over, so many decades, those are not the things that are typically valued in those conversations, in those good kid conversations, right? So how do we shift that, right? How do we literally, in those moments where you're like, no, but yes, but no, how do we advocate for the value of the very humanistic things that we do bring to the table while still bringing that business forward? This is what we need to figure out.
I think you kind of answered it yesterday with the whole being thing. I'm going to bring that up because I actually thought about it because I was like, we as designers, we sort of love the idea of like creating a more human-centered where we want to safeguard that and guide that. But I think in different rooms, it's like a different language.
Right.
And I think one of the trappings I often see is like if we don't understand the language of those different, and we often are a minority in those rooms. So I think about in the majority, it's like how, like, if you travel to a different country, how do you know the norms and customs of those spaces? So
right.
What I often hear many senior executives, give guidance back to up and coming leaders was, hey, like, as you're entering these senior space, like, what is the language they're speaking? They're speaking revenue, they're speaking cost, they're speaking risk, they're speaking reputation, they're thinking all these kind of considerations. And so one of the things I find that's a superpower for leaders stepping into senior roles is you can still bring human-centeredness, process, judgment, all those kind of, points, and still package it in a way that is digestible by a broad audience that you're kind of selling, those solutions to. And so I often find that's a critical shift.
Mm-hmm. Just serve them the beans. Don't tell
You're still gonna get to your outcome, but you may need to speak a slightly different language to help unlock that thing.
Yeah, I think one of the words, and there's a lot of human feelings around this word, is magic. When I hear, and you brought that up earlier, and I love it too, and I have a complex relationship. I think a lot of us join Disney because we're like, I'm gonna go make magic, right? And you think about your child and all these things come up, but the business and Bob Iger aren't going, hey, how magic are we right now, right? And so to talk about like the ROI and things coming in, one of the things that we've really figured out, and this has been a learning lesson for myself, and I think even our leadership team, this is really how we're thinking about it right now, is that when you see a magic trick, if you see the cards up the magician's sleeve, the magic trick is ruined, right? And so this idea of nailing the basics and nailing quality is really important to us. So we're using AI to help us. We're actually building tools to help us as designers and researchers assess how we're nailing the basics. So we have something called PIES, predictable, intuitive, efficient, and streamlined. And it's a metric we've created for ourselves as a design organization that we actually measure on every single choice we make. And so this is something we've integrated into our practice, and we're all sick of also hearing the word pies, magical pies. But it allows us for when those moments of actual emotional resonance need to happen for a user, that we know everything else is working, right? Like that streaming playback is gonna be perfect. So then we offer you the new feature and you're like, oh my God, that was incredible. It's the reason why you don't have fireworks all day long at the parks, right? Like you have to make room for those emotional moments, and that when they happen, they have to be incredible and you can't have anything in the way. So that practice of pies allows us to focus on those moments where we really are trying to drive that emotional resonance for our users.
Yeah, magical pies sounds like something
I
you would
also
find
love
in
pie.
Wonderland.
I'll just do one quick add, which is I think there are several forces in our favor versus a few years ago. I think the first is, we as an industry we're constant, we've been through the ask for a seat at the table, prove our value,
Yes.
be included, all of the things that we know and definitely don't love. But I think, because research, for instance, hasn't been necessarily tied to the P&L or the bottom line, we haven't always been this directly associated with the business strategy.
Right.
And so I think, now we're moving on from saying, as a researcher, make sure that you understand, what dashboards are being looked at every day, what metrics are we tracking, what does the company really care about, what does the CEO really care about. But now that AI is part of the strategy, it is almost the business strategy, we are the perfect people to build that bridge and go, here's how this is going to play out, here's where it's working, here's where it's not. If you have the credibility because you understand the business and what's important, then you can articulate, okay, you're not going to get the result you want if this is the direction we go. What about X, Y, or Z? So I think it changes the lens, but we have to position ourselves differently to have that conversation in a different way.
Yeah. You want to talk about how you're orienting your team that way now?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a bunch of different ways. I think the first one is, we're also experimenting with whether you want to call it pods or, whatever the term is, but cross-functional mixed teams working on a shared outcome, mixture of different disciplines, all with the same goal in mind. I think the type of work that we're surfacing, we send comms across the entire product organization every week, highlighting one study and the findings, and it's very much moved from, here's what's broken or here's what was successful to here's what this means, like here's how this will actually play out in terms of our strategy. So, I think the visibility is important. But then I think the other thing that we're putting more effort into is instead of, everything resting on a share out or a conversation or a meeting, where you may be in the minority, actually collaborating with our peers and partners whenever we're crystallizing a point of view. So it could be a narrative doc, it could be a plan, it could be a roadmap, but making sure that the insights are integrated in there so that people can make those connections more easily. So I think, how do we take advantage of the fact that things are becoming a bit more amorphous, a bit more blended together versus, things being thrown over the wall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was going to add to that. I think one thing that allows us to bring that superpower is, like, if you think about research and design in a strategy setting, it's like no one wants boring documents. Strategy documents are very long and they can be so head spinning. Totally. And so sometimes, like, people in the room don't even know what's being talked about. But I think the power of this group is you can literally make strategy tangible through the experiential layer, and I think that's a superpower that really never goes.
It's about clarity.
It's that clarity, and I think how many times have we been in stakeholder meetings where, like, different people understand completely different things, you leave it and you don't even know what's happening. And so I think that power for design and research to drive that alignment, but the emotional clarity of what that strategy even means in customer benefit lens, that's really, to me, an essential, it never goes away.
Yeah, it's so hard to do.
Yes.
Come to clarity.
Yeah, I had a design mentor who he taught us that so many people will think they're talking about the same thing, but then when you make a visual artifact, they realize they were talking about completely different things. And as soon as they see the visual artifact and can respond to it, then they can align, then they can talk things through. So I think, for people, especially someone who is classically trained as a design researcher who doesn't necessarily have wireframing skills, to be able to use AI to, like, vibe code a prototype and then say, this is what I meant, this is what I believe would solve this problem, is a really powerful new skill, to make it real.
The other thing that I like about that is it forces those questions, those difficult questions in those conversations, to your point, much more quickly.
Right.
Because instead of debating a number, a metric, a bullet point in a 5-page doc, everyone's looking at a working, functional product. And it's very easy for the CEO or whoever to go, that part there, why is that not working? And it's a completely different conversation than team alignment and timelines and roadmaps.
Like, one of the things practically speaking, is, an SVP design I know, he's telling me, like, in those strategy meetings now, empowered with AI, while the stakeholders are yapping away about different things, he's like live prototyping, making, so that in those, they're like, he shows them. And they're like, you made that in this meeting? He's like, yeah. And it really accelerates the mind share.
And it kind of lifts the veil a little
it completely, and it puts the designer again in the seat of driving the kind of conversation through this artifact. So I think like our superpowers can be translated in those environments without letting go, what we're really good at.
Yeah, and that's a real power move that you just talked about right there. Yeah.
He's just, I'm going to do it right here.
Yeah.
So.
I was gonna say, I mean, we did that a lot at Fjord. Like you'd be in a client meeting, they're discussing something, and you just start whiteboarding it. And then as soon as you do that, they're like, oh, wait a minute, you have value.
Remember
like,
whiteboarding?
Yeah,
So cool.
I know.
Yes, to be able to
But
do that.
it really is that powerful,
Very much.
transmuting layer where you're like, hey, I hear what we're all talking about, and because of my expertise in this, I can make this real right now, on a whiteboard. And so, I mean, it's cool that that can now be spread across the team, because I do think design researchers they're noticing things that, even like a trained product designer is not seeing. And so to be able to then make that real and have folks see it live in a meeting, it's lovely.
Really powerful.
Yeah.
I still do sketch notes in every meeting, and it's still a skill, even if you can draw or not draw. Just to your point, to be up to on that whiteboard sketching. Also, I've invested in so many half sheets to draw. Everyone can draw, to ideate and just put them out on every single table in the office. Facilities hates me out in the office. We have Sharpies, and just bringing back all those physical materials that allow us to get tangible really quickly.
Yeah, that's such great advice. All right, I'm going to ask a couple different kinds of questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience, see if you all have any questions for our panel. What should we, in this moment, like from where you sit, running teams, talking to so many leaders, what should we as an industry stop talking about, and what should we start talking about?
Design is not dying.
We can stop talking.
We can stop talking about that.
Okay, amazing.
It's been driving me nuts
Same.
for a while, and I do see there's a lot of stress, I think, with the workforce today, and there is a lot of change. But I don't think if we are seriously, practicing our craft right, that is influencing both how to solve the problem well and also how to shape the problems that we're aligning on. There's a real superpower, I think, that's coming for design to activate its true potential.
Yeah.
And I think if we direct our attention away from, the death and destruction to what might we
Abundance
do,
mindset.
how could we do it, how might I reframe this situation, it really puts us in a very different place.
Yeah.
So I really hope we can direct the energy towards that direction so that we can create more opportunities and investment in design and research.
So design is dead is dead. Thank you. Okay.
Well said, Julie.
Yeah, I want to figure out a not too spicy way to say it, but I've loved the conversations around sometimes the user and the ecosystem we're designing for, we need to think beyond the human. And I love those conversations. And I think starting to understand, yes, maybe we design the most efficient, straw for enjoying our beverages, but we just harmed a bunch of turtles. And so really getting into that consequence scanning that, I think a lot of the conversation right now, especially with AI, is AI and humans, but I think getting into these larger conversations of the environmental impact, or are we disenfranchising another group by what we're designing, and really getting into that practice of scanning for all consequences is something that I'd love for us to unlock even further as designers and researchers. And so I think we need a turtle platform, Michael, to start doing some turtle research. But I do think that you nailed it, Gordon.
Yeah.
Design is not dead, but it needs to broaden.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
And we're going to go through cycles. Some cycles are really painful and maybe even traumatizing, but I think, again, we have to look forward and figure out how we're doing that. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, something I've been thinking a lot about, because we have this brilliant advisor at Headspace, Barath, who's the former chief innovation officer from Intuit, who's just, been in the tech world forever. He's like, look, AI is another wave of a new technology capability. We all went through the .com era where everyone was like, I need a website, pets.com, muffins.com, pillows.com, and that was the medium was a website. And then we went through the era, which I don't know if everyone remembers this era, but I hope we sort of do, is where you would like purchase software on a CD-ROM at Staples, you know, like in a box, and like there's like had a box around the little thing. Anyway, you know, these eras, and then it went into, okay, now everyone needs a mobile app, and that was when I entered the tech game and worked in a creative technology studio and just like churned out apps and brought a design research practice to that particular app development studio, because they were like, we're just making pizza delivery apps. And I was like, okay, can we like, let's talk about this a little bit more. So anyway, we're in this wave now where we have this new capability of AI, and I think like the thing we need to start talking about is how that as a material, as a medium, can be useful for solving particular problems, but not that is the only mechanism to solve all problems. Like it's a material. You wouldn't use clay to build a dress. I mean, you could, but like, you know, it'd be really heavy. So it's sort of like, hey, is this the right material to solve this particular problem? You know, is generative AI or agentic AI the right particular like medium for solving this particular problem? Like that's sort of what I feel like, need to interrogate a little bit more within this AI bubble moment. Because it's good, it's a wave of a new technology. It's going to enable, I mean, it already is enabling so many things, but really understanding what it's right for is, and I'm speaking about that separate from like, will AI replace portions of our jobs? Like I mean it more as like, this is a material we are designing with.
Yes.
This is a thing we are using to make things that solve human problems.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. We only have a few minutes left, so speaking of circles, I'm going to circle back to shapes now. And Gordon.
Oh gosh, me again.
we went from tectonic
Yeah, so,
plates
okay.
to, we'll go in the same order.
Yeah, I thought of this a lot, and I was up till 2 a.m. literally thinking. I obsess over these little questions. So my shape, and I'll give some explanation to it, is how many of you are familiar with kintsugi? A few of you. Okay, so if you, so I imagine the shape of a bowl, and it's cracked,
Oh, yes.
and you want to repair it. And there's a lot of imperfections, and the shape has changed, but you do it with gold. And I look at it as the golden repair. And so it's reframing the idea of like, we're broken, we've got to go through all this hell, to like reassembling something of newer value, greater value, actually, because you've done the practice. And there's also a very therapeutic and reflective practice to building this new kintsugi bowl. So we actually did that last year at our summit with fellow design executives, and I found that so helpful because it reframes whatever challenges you guys are going through to continually reassemble, repaint, and review the object with greater value. And so I found that super helpful as we navigate so much changes. You may break a few times, and it's okay to like know how to reassemble. So that's my shape of moving from tectonics to something more personal.
Well, I'm sorry you stayed up till 2 a.m., but I'm also so glad you did, because that's really beautiful. Thank you, Gordon. Okay, what's your future shape, Craig?
I think, honestly, right now, it's still a kaleidoscope. Like, we're still twisting it. We're still figuring out the pattern. No one knows what the future is yet. We'll know it when we see it, and then, you know, we can decide whether it's good or bad. But, you know, I think the pace of change right now is outpacing the change of response. And so, you know, how do we continue to try and keep up the best we can?
A kaleidoscope is a very interesting metaphor in our non-deterministic times. They're very, very unpredictable, and yet still quite beautiful. Yeah. Eleanor.
Okay, so if I had a hunk of wood, now I think that was, I don't know, I couldn't figure out the hunk of wood. So what kept coming up for me is, I think you had it on one of your slides, is also with the white rabbit and the caterpillars smoking the vape pen, you know, all this stuff, like asking you who you are. It's all really overwhelming, and we've had some years, right? And so much is like being pushed at us. I have a practice every single night. I try to do 1 row of my knitting. Sometimes it's 20 rows, sometimes it's just 1. But it's an investment in myself, and so that I can just kind of move forward. But also like every stitch is kind of like code. Like I'm making something, and every day it's shaping into something new. And I think it's really beautiful. And it's a reminder, I think, on kind of 2 pieces. One is like to connect to the things that maybe don't have a screen that help you see those moments to be human. And then just, we're all making this as we go. And whether it's 1 row or 20 rows, like for all of us just to take a deep breath and like invest in ourselves, and that's how we're going to move forward.
I love that. I love that, like, you're using your hands to do something, and ultimately, despite all the technology that we get to use, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and I make a lot of mistakes too. So
I love it.
My shape is compost.
Wait, did ChatGPT say
One of the
that's what
designers at Headspace always says, "Hear me out." So compost, yeah, not related to ChatGPT. I think that the new shape of UX is compost because we are this thing that can break down other things and transmute it into something nourishing that then can grow other things. And if we do our jobs really well and we're actually looking and observing and seeing, like, what are humans actually struggling with? What is the world actually struggling with? How do I then take what we are doing at my company and shift us a bit closer to that? Then we are breaking down some of these things that are otherwise not usable and returning those nutrients to something that is usable. So that's that. And then I also think as practitioners, like our physical shape is going to be something more like a weird AI centaur, which is like, I don't know if any of you have read that theory, but it's sort of like treating it as an augmentation on us, an exoskeleton that makes us stronger and more able to do things that are beyond our own processing capability. So it's the shape of what, like this sort of us with like weird, AI components on us that turn us into these centaurs that ensure that we're able to do things that are a little bit bigger than what we could do before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
We're going to augment ourselves into some crazy cool centaurs. I love it. Well, we are literally right exactly at time. I want to thank you all so much for making your way to this ballroom this morning to have this great conversation with us. I really enjoyed it, and I'm really grateful. So please join me in thanking our panelists.